I'm being a husband. Not right now. I'm being a teacher right now. All right.
Hey, babe, can I get your help for a minute?
Not right now. I'm being a father. Anyway.
Hey, babe.
Not right now. I'm doing the Lord's work. Just kidding, guys. How y'all doing? So, just being a little silly here, but I wanted to try to point out I had something come to my mind this week, and I was thinking about it, and I thought this would be a good way to illustrate it. But sometimes we get carried away in worshiping an aspect of God. So, for example, we love Jesus, right? Our Savior. And some people get so caught up in worshiping the Savior that they forget some of what He also asks, which is to be the Lord of our lives. Or vice versa. Some people get really caught up in thinking that He's Lord and forget that He's also Savior. And so I just kind of wanted to point out that if you look back at these funny videos, I'm not just a father. I'm not just a son. I'm not just a husband. I'm not just a teacher, and I'm not just a Lord's servant, although that being most important. We have lots of things that we have to consider, or lots of things that lots of roles that we take on, and some that we maybe shouldn't, but a lot that we should. And so we're more complex than the single identity that we have in a moment. When I'm with my kids, I'm still not just their father, right? I'm more than that. And so it's just important to remember that, you can see I'm not that complex, but even with something like as simple as that, I'm more than just one aspect. And sometimes we get carried away. I feel like we can get carried away with thinking that God is one aspect, or we want to worship that one aspect. And so, real quick, I was just going to just read a couple of scriptures out to you. This is from Deuteronomy, chapter 7. Deuteronomy is tough if you haven't read it, but there's some interesting things here, and it's worth studying. It helps you understand the New Testament. Please make sure you always are reading both sides. But chapter 7, verse 2 of Deuteronomy says, "And when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you, and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally." Talking about the Canaanites who live in the land with the Israelites. "You must destroy them totally. Make no treaty. Show them no mercy." Verse 3 says, "Do not intermarry with them." And it continues going. It says that if they do, then what's going to happen is the Canaanites are going to turn them away from their God, which does happen. They do not get rid of all the Canaanites, and as a result, it spirals down through all of Judges. It's just terrible. And God knew that. And so it seems awful to say, hey, destroy them all. Have nothing to do with them. But that was God's justice. That's an aspect of God. He has not changed. When you worship God, the Trinity, the three in one, that God has not changed. He still does not like sin, and He does not enjoy His people being separate from Him. And so, of course, to remedy that, He sent Jesus Christ to die for us. And so we love that part. And Paul writes in Romans, this is chapter 5. In verse 20, this is a very good passage if you haven't read chapter 5. But in chapter 5, verse 20, it says, "Now the law came in to increase the trespass." So the law, the old law, in like Exodus and Leviticus, Deuteronomy, all that law came to increase the trespass, which means that it just made sin even worse, made it even harder to follow God. But where sin increased, grace abounded all the more. So although God was putting out a law that was making things harder for them to follow, it actually was also setting up a greater work of grace that yet we could not see. And so we can't forget that God is complex in a way. I mean, he's simple in the fact that He doesn't change, but He's complex in the fact that He is lots of things. He's loving, but He's just, and He's merciful, and He has grace, but He also has expectations of us. And so just think about that this week. Try not to get carried away with chasing just one aspect of God, whether you fall on one side or the other. Just remember that He is whole, and to worship God means to worship everything he does because he is supreme. And so yeah, that's it. I hope you guys have a good time. I know there's supposed to be a message later this week, I think on Thursday, and then of course Easter service will be coming up online this week. Stay tuned for more information about that. All right, bye. Stay right there.
Hey, Daddy.
Okay, Eden, am I in the picture?
Yep.
Okay.
Ah!